Hey, I told you I want to talk to you about the mob effect. First of all, this is really not directly related to DJ Durkin keeping his job or losing his job. That your opinion is your opinion. Here's my concern with this. They went through an entire process. Supposedly got an outside source. I don't know all the details. An outside source that determined and gave enough information to the Board of Regents that they decided that they would not fire the coach and they would reinstate him. Now, I don't know if they didn't talk to all the stakeholders or not, but undoubtedly the stakeholders were not addressed or the mob wasn't addressed. And what do I mean by this? If you don't know what situation you're going to find yourself in. Here's a concerning statistic. I read a USA Today article. You know that they have research, and this is what research says, that heat strokes can be 100% prevented. Heat stroke deaths can be 100%. Let me read it. Rebecca Stern, who's the head of the Corey Stringer Foundation. Corey Stringer is an NFL lineman who died of a heat stroke with the Minnesota Vikings in 2001, I think it was. Stern says the encouraging news about heat strokes is that there's strong data to support the belief that there is a 100% survival when it is treated aggressively and appropriately. When treated aggressively and appropriately, which means that when a heat stroke happened, someone comes in and judges whether you treat it aggressively and appropriately. Now, supposedly that's what they were doing with the Durkin case. And undoubtedly they came to the end and said, hey, this was unfortunate. There was a guy that did it. Not all of the responsibility falls upon the coach and or the atmosphere. And they put him back in. And then a mob, I mean, we can call it what we want, but the reality, that's what it is. And hey, I'm not saying that those people that's in the mob aren't stakeholders that should have been consulted. Here's Martin Houston's concern. When are you going to find yourself on the side of something and be investigated for it? And the evidence or the research or the investigation comes down with one thing, but the mob has already decided another opinion. And now I know the president of Maryland, and you guys can come in on this really quick. The president of Maryland, Lowe, is getting praise because he came back and decided to fire him. Well, whoa. Wasn't he in there? And he had already been told if he didn't bring Durkin back, he was going to lose his job. So he could either bring him back and resign. And at the end, he knew that's what was going to happen. By the way, Lowe is leaving, y'all. He was going to be leaving at the end anyway. So it's not like he took this huge, big chance, but now he's looked at it as a hero. He could have did this up front if he had if that was his true feelings. Why didn't he just stand up and say that at the beginning? Why did it? So I'm telling you, the mob effect can move and change things. Guys, I'm not saying one way or the other whether he should or should not have been fired. I don't know the evidence. All I know is we live in a society now where things that were considered pushing players is now considered abusing players. It's scary. And here's the thing. With all that said, Alabama, you might just lose a coach. You might just lose Loxley to Maryland. And if you lose Loxley to Maryland, you might just lose a recruiting base that we start to have a little love in. So there you go. I know we got to get the break here. We'll come back and we'll continue this conversation. Then we'll have Deal No Deal in the fourth quarter. We'll continue. If you want to comment on the DJ Durkin case, you want to get your score prediction in, Pat, hold on. We'll get you on the other side. Robert, hold on. We'll get you on the other side. Hey, the Maryland situation, whatever you want to talk about, and whatever your opinion is, you'll get a chance to air it right here on the Blitz on Todd 102.9 and 100.9. We talked about the mob effect and what happened with DJ Durkin. Not really a political statement on whether DJ Durkin should or should not have been fired. I think you can see either side based on outside looking in. What was reported was pretty significant in terms of you could put it at Durkin's footstep. But then there was a commission that went and supposedly investigated, and they came to another conclusion. So the truth probably lies somewhere in between. My concern is not with whether or not this coach loses his job or not. I'm sure Durkin will land on his feet and everything. My concern is how social media has the ability and others have the ability, when they don't necessarily know all the evidence, to change a direction. And one great example of that, C.J. Watson reminded me that the reason Alabama has a new defensive coordinator this year is because the mob at Tennessee thought that they deserved a better job a better coach than Greg Schiano. And so he was already about to be hired, and now that coach is gone, and now he didn't get that job. The AD ended up being fired after that, and it was all based on the mob effect. And so you can agree or disagree. I think that things need to be done. More measures need to be put in place. But my concern is this. When the studies, according to Rebecca Stern, who's the head of the Corey Stringer Foundation, which does a lot of research in this, says that they can prove that there's strong data to support that when treated aggressively and appropriately, which are subjective, which means that you get to determine what that is unless there's clear rules laid out, that 100% survival is possible. I believe it's possible, but 100%, that means that at any point, someone could be held responsible if something is done wrong or a person loses their life. And we say that about Maryland, but do we say the same thing about the upper echelon, the Dabo Sweeneys and the Coach Sabins and all of those? Would there be as much outcry for that coach's job if a player were to die from a heat stroke? I'm just saying. And if the mob effect, would the mob be for or against? And we can say what we want, but there's certain things that dictate how the mob reacts. But let's get a score prediction from Pat. Pat, you're in with the Blitz. What's on your mind, man? Yeah,
hey, real quick, Martin. I want to give you 45-9 and roughly 255 yards for that we're going to
allow.
Give up.
Okay.
Allow.
All right.
And and I'll call back at
in a little bit on
the hour.
Okay.
And, we'll talk about it. But man, mob effect goes all the way back to 2,000 years ago, sir. You preach about it every Sunday.
Yeah.
And it's an awful thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, have a blessed day.
All right. Thank you, sir. Thanks, Pat. Yeah. He brings up a good point. The mob effect does go back at least to 2000. He's talking about the crucifixion of Jesus, where they decided to let Jesus go, and then the mob said crucify him, and he ended up getting crucified. The difference is this. That was one small group that had to be present. Now, the mob effect, because of social media, can spread worldwide by somebody sitting in their bedroom and has no idea what's going on. So that's the difference. But anyway, let's bring in Robert. He wants to talk about the Maryland and Durkin situation. Maryland, you're in with the Blitz. Robert, you're in with the Blitz. What's on your mind?
Hey, how's it going, Martin?
Going good, man.
It's just kind of scary how much you and I agree on things. It's almost like you're living in my head. Other than that incident with Jalen Hurts, which I'm glad you finally realized you were wrong.
Hey, hold on. You can't throw that out. Listen, I never said that Tua was not better than Jalen. I said Jalen doesn't lose his job until he does something to lose his job, which I thought he should have not lost his job. I thought Tua should have started playing in LA this time last year. I was on my show and Ryan Fowler's show. And you know what I said? I said, he'll start getting some time. It's bye week. They'll get him more playing time. Didn't happen. Then I was shocked that it didn't happen against after the Mississippi State game. And then it was going to happen in Clemson, but we had the game won. And then, of course, the one game where it was like, okay, and it happened. And I mean, I've been a Tua guy until – I mean, not a Tua guy. I was whoever's going to win the job. Of course, we see why Jalen did not beat Tua out. And I don't have a problem with that.
Oh, I know. I'm just thinking about you, but it's always fun.
But listen, but there's some people that believe that I believe that still think that I believe Jalen should be the starter.
You are totally 100% right on this mob. There's too much of this mob mentality rule going on, not just in football, but in the country as a whole.
Right.
It is awful. I mean, we can't have a country or anything ruled by the will of the mob. The mob doesn't get things right. The mob doesn't have time to research. The mob doesn't, and they often don't. They're full 100% emotion.
Right.
I mean, you cannot run anything based on 100% emotion. You have to have facts, data, evidence. I'm an engineer. I don't do anything without facts, data, evidence. You can prove it, and we go. You can't. You don't have any evidence or data. I'm sorry. I know you feel that's the reason,
right?
But you haven't shown that's the reason,
right?
And with the Florida region, with the Maryland case, I mean, you may not agree with it, but okay, they ruled. Then let it go. You can't have a mob coming around later saying, "Well, we want you to overturn it, and we're going to rant and rave and shout until you do what we want you to do."
Right. And I guess my question is, Robert, where were all of these people that? Now, all of a sudden, where were they at when this was going on? I mean, I don't remember all of these people coming up. And like I said, my concern is that there's been a statement made, Robert, by the Stern lady in a USA Today article that says they believe that there's data saying that 100% of the time when treated appropriately and aggressively, survival is expected or possible. Well, I mean, who decides appropriately and aggressively? And when it doesn't, how do you track it down to, because somebody's going to be held responsible, right? If that's the case, if you think something can be handled 100% of the time, you have to find somebody that is directly responsible. If there's a chance that it can't happen, then you don't have to necessarily find someone that is responsible. It could be, hey, there was a mistake here, or was something here. But I like I said, it's just the mob effect concerns me in anything.
And you're right, social media is making it too easy to manufacture a mob effect. It makes it easy to get a crowd of people together.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, the media, which I think is the root of all evil in this country, I'm sorry, no offense to you guys. They make it seem like a mob is more of a reflection of the public opinion than it really is. Social media is not public opinion.
No, it's not.
A few thousand people are not.
That's right.
But it's just a cop-out. But look how Twitter blew up. Well, I'm sorry, that's like 10,000 people in 300 million. Again, there's my engineer talking here.
Yes.
Does not tell me how the rest of the other 300 million people feel.
Hey, Robert, you know what? I'm getting ready to start the mob effect. Loxley is out of here. I'm just kidding.
It could be.
I've already had somebody say, "Don't you start that."
The tree and holes, like with Nick Saban.
Hey, listen, that's what I was gonna say. If you look, Maryland, he's from Maryland. He was interim coach there. He's leading an unbelievable offense. He's been trained under Nick Saban. Who do you think is the best candidate for that job? I mean, Maryland, we've been knocking out players from Maryland in the last couple of years in our recruiting. Got a couple on the docket for this year. I'm just saying. I mean, am I starting? Am I starting something?
Yes, you are. So you know, get off that. La 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 la.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, good talking with you, buddy.
All right, thanks, Robert. Appreciate it.